Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, of course, brought to you by our friends at Circa Sports. We're talking waiver wire pickups ahead of Week 10. Unfortunately, a bit of a lesser waiver wire period once more, it feels like, in terms of different running backs, receivers, tight ends to add. The quarterback market, not as seismic in injury shifts as we had last week, but still a little bit mundane, too. So we'll get to our top five list in a second. Let's hit the music first, though. And welcome everyone to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me on Twitter at JBFantasySports. Alongside me every week is Jake Letarski. You can follow him at RotoJake. Week 9 done. We have critical bye weeks here for Week 10. A few of the top offenses in the league we have bye weeks for. And then really, Jake, for the rest of the season, it's not too bad. We have the Ravens and Bills. I think it's in Week 11. And then one
we
random
got the Week 14 buys, right?
Yeah, we have one random Week 12 week with no buys. But otherwise, it's just really bad teams that hopefully you're not rostering a lot of these players or having to utilize them. So one more week of difficult bye weeks. We'll try to get you through that and recommend a few top pickups. And you and I have been doing now the top 5 overall pickups early on throughout the week for the last couple of weeks now. I think it's been pretty successful. I would be shocked if we differ much on the top 5 overall, Jake, but I do think the rankings of them can be disputed a little bit.
Yeah, right on. So should we jump right into it? Because I think number one is where we differ. And my number one is, I'll admit, it's a little bit of a cop-out, right? Because he's rostered in 48% of Yahoo leagues. So he barely meets our threshold. But I'm looking at Tank Dell of the Texans. I think he has to be your number one pickup here. I know anyone that's tuning in can see our cover boy, and I think I have an idea of who your one might be. But I thought about it, and if I'm going to make a claim for one of those two, I think Tank Dell's production is a little bit safer, whereas the other option that we'll talk about in a little bit was maybe a little more situational.
Yeah, when I'm looking at these top 5 lists, I'm going through all the guys that I could pick up off of waivers, and everywhere Tank Dell was rostered. So to me, the 48%, it's a tough recommendation for number one overall. Obviously caught the game-winning touchdown pass, scored two touchdowns overall in Stroud's record-setting performance in that win over the Buccaneers on Sunday. Totally reasonable, but you're right. Keaton Mitchell, by far my number one waiver wire pickup this week, only rostered in 4% of leagues. And if you recall, we did this maybe 3-4 weeks ago when Schefter, one of the NFL insiders, was like in on Keaton Mitchell, and he had this massive rise in MFL or My Fantasy leagues. And you're like, okay, wait, what's going on here? Never really got utilized to the certain extent that you'd anticipate. Of course, has his breakout game, though, this past week in what was a blowout game, and got a lot of his work in the second half.
Yeah, so that's the reason why I didn't put Keaton Mitchell at number 1, and I was almost tempted to bump him down to 3, but I think I'm going to switch back and go to number 2 because, like you said, he's someone that's pretty much readily available everywhere, right? There wasn't enough. You could buy the talent maybe or some of the hype, but there was never enough production or usage to warrant him before. Now he's going to get scooped up in a lot of formats this league. The reason I did not rank him number 1 is, like you said, it was a blowout game. 17% snap share is not super great, and a lot of that came in the fourth quarter and garbage time. So yes, he excelled with the opportunity that is given to him, but Gus Edwards is RB1. Well, oddly enough, technically Justice Hill played most of the game, not just garbage time, but like the entire game. He led the way with a 64% snap share, and Edwards was a little bit less, but Edwards, of course, scored 2 touchdowns. Edwards is basically the goal line back. Hill is apparently their RB1, and Mitchell is there, and Lamar's going to vulture rushing touchdowns too, left and right. Obviously was not the case here on Sunday, but I just, if I'm looking at Tank Dell or, even some of these other options, I'm confident in Tank Dell's usage and his role the rest of the season. I mean, I know the Texans have ran some injuries at the wide receiver position, but I'm taking this from the box score to breakdown here. Tank Dell led the Texans in routes and tied for the lead in targets with 11, tied with Dalton Schultz, and of course the 114-2 receiving line, and then the big game-winning touchdown. And he ran the ball twice. He got a pair of rushing attempts in this game. So I feel a lot better about flexing Tank Dell than Keaton Mitchell and just about any week moving forward. So
I made this mistake with Devon Achane earlier this season. I thought, hey, Raheem Mostert's there. Jeff Wilson's going to come back for the Dolphins. There's no way that I think Achane's going to be fantasy relevant in the 4, 5, 6 carries he got. Right? Remember, it was the breakout game against the Broncos. Same concept that they were thrashing a lesser team, and then you had Etienne get a few carries at the end. It's like, okay, great.
But can you really call it a mistake when he's been sitting on IR the last 4 weeks? I know, granted, it was fluky.
If he had been healthy, he would be a guy that people were starting. And even after that Broncos game, he was still startable each of those 2 weeks that he was healthy. So, no, I do. I think it was a mistake. At least I had not anticipated Etienne having that kind of value. So I don't want to make the same mistake again. Keaton Mitchell is a better running back than Justice Hill. Whatever the Ravens think the function is that Justice Hill provides them, Keaton Mitchell can do it better. And I think we saw that finally getting showcased, even if it was in junk time. And I think this is an offense that needs that kind of explosiveness. Gus Edwards can't provide that. I know Odell Beckham got his touchdown. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. He can't provide that, right? Like, there isn't a guy other than Lamar Jackson that has that one-play touchdown potential. And the Ravens' offense is really good. But just imagine what it could be if you have a Devon Achane level speed threat in the backfield. That Keaton Mitchell is all that more, I think, from a combine and like a draft Devy thing. Like, a lot of the dynasty guys are familiar with Keaton Mitchell from his speed. I just don't want to make the same mistake. So he is the top pickup for me.
So you're more of a dump the rest of your FAAB on him, and I'm more of a keep him honest FAAB bid. Kind of.
I'm going all in on the FAAB.
How we can, that's pretty much how we can classify this. I'm looking at $18 to $22 probably, and you're looking at the rest of it.
Yeah, and part of it's because we've done this show now obviously every single week, but the past 2-3 weeks, really, really mundane answers. Like there just has not been a lot of top options. And if I think a guy can win me a few weeks, even though bye weeks are trickling down and theoretically you have less running back needs than before, okay, but I'm taking a valuable weapon away from somebody else who could be using that same thing. So I would be going empty the FAAB budget, I think, rest of the way for Keaton Mitchell.
Okay, yeah, fair enough here. All right, so now we got a couple more options here. I felt a little guilty about this one because it's similar to Tank Dell, not quite as highly rostered, but I feel like I have to put Pop Douglas back on here again.
Sure.
Demario Douglas of the Patriots, he's 35% rostered. And, a lot of this is the Patriots' injury situation, and some of it is just the other receivers are bad. But Pop Douglas, 83% of the snaps, that's a team high. 36% or 36 routes, that's a position group high. Hunter Henry actually ran a few more routes there, and Demario Douglas was tied with Henry with 7 targets here. So it was interesting. Jerry notes this in his box score breakdown that the Patriots, with the situation they have at wide receiver, they used 12 personnel, 2 tight ends on 84% of the snaps. That's just the offense that they went to. It actually worked out for Ramondre Stevenson. I like that, finally getting something out of that heavy investment there. But in any case, in these 2 tight end sets, Douglas was still out on the field 83% of the time. And, we'll see what happens with the rest of these, receivers that New England has here. But I don't know. Douglas looks like he's wide receiver 1 right now.
Totally fine recommendation. Juju Smith-Schuster came back healthy, still got involved a little bit more, but I agree.
He ran half as many routes as Douglas. That's
he's
that'll grow, but yep.
Yeah, he's a better receiver in the matchup this week. I think the rest of the season you could say that safely the Patriots are going to be trailing often. I would normally say in situations like that, receivers have a bit more value, but I'm not confident Mac Jones and that offensive group overall can make somebody just be relevant when their defense is giving up a lot of points. So that's the only downside. If you say, how many times rest of season will the over-under of a Patriots game be above 40 points? My bet, without looking at the schedule too closely, is maybe once or twice. So limited offensive production.
Yep. I knew immediately that was going to be your rebuttal, because every time the Patriots come up, and that is a legitimate rebuttal because it's Mac Jones and they just don't quite have it together. So that's fair enough. Yeah. But again, I guess I'm playing it safe here and going with the steady touches.
Yeah, and you and I mixed up our top 5 list, but it's more or less the same. So you had Tank Dell 1, Pop Douglas 2, Demario Douglas 2. I had Keaton Mitchell 1. Mitchell is number 3 for you. I have Dobbs at number 2 and Dobbs at number 4 for you. I think there is room, especially of Tua or Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, I think, as well as part of the bye weeks. No, Jalen Hurts. So Tua,
it's Mahomes,
Jalen Hurts, or Mahomes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, if you're missing any of those 3, maybe you go Taylor Heineke. That's what I had to do in the stake league. But otherwise, I think Josh Dobbs, now officially set to be your starting quarterback for the Vikings, is totally reasonable. Yeah. And I just needed to see it. Like, I knew what he could do. Obviously, with the Cardinals, we had times where, from a rushing floor perspective, he was a top 12 fantasy quarterback in a couple different weeks. now is blessed with way better weapons, I think, in an offensive scheme that matters. And, oh, by the way, has a decent enough match against the Saints this week where they aren't that juggernaut of a defense, where I think Josh Dobbs is absolutely a starting fantasy quarterback this week.
And the Vikings are poor enough on defense themselves that they're gonna be in these types of shootouts just like they were last week. Of course, Josh Dobbs was the hero last week. Came in, had 2 touchdown passes, and this is after Jaron Hall, right, had a concussion.
Yep.
And Josh Dobbs didn't even know his teammates' names. What was the story here? They the first huddle that they did, they just ran over 5 different cadences they do really quick, right? and the offensive coordinator is radio in. Basically, they get in a huddle, and the receivers were just saying, "Hey, I'm going to run this route. I'm going to run this route." And when the offensive coordinator radio is in the plays, Dobbs tells his receivers, then they say where they're going to be. And he still managed to find success in that situation. Could you call that lightning in a bottle? Sure enough, because we've seen plenty of bad from Josh Dobbs this year, and with Arizona. But you're right.
No, all the credit in the world goes to Arthur Smith. Gotta love that guy. Don't you worry about those fantasy managers, Arthur Smith. Your team is doing great on the field that you're losing to a guy that didn't even know his teammates' names 2 days prior. So kudos to you, Arthur Smith.
Yeah,
I love you a lot. You're doing a lot of great things for us. So Josh Dobbs was number 2 on my list because I think the need for quarterback could matter for bye weeks in week 10 here. Again, he was number 4. You had Keaton Mitchell number 3. So who is your number 5 guy?
We got to go to the tight ends, and it is finally Cade Otton time. I wasn't quite buying the volume beforehand. He had 6 targets in back-to-back weeks leading up to his breakout. Then he finally went out and went nuts this week and had a couple touchdowns here. And when you have that kind of ceiling, that's a startable fantasy tight end in just about any format.
So how do you rank these tight ends? Because we've talked about Musgrave a lot. Trey McBride, possibly still available in a lot of places. Didn't have a good game this week, but should get Kyler Murray back. For the Cardinals, you got Michael Mayer. We've talked about a lot as well, too. And then there's Cade Otton. So there's a number of guys that are waiver wire fodder. How would you rank those?
The names you just said, I think I'm going McBride, Otton, Mayer, Musgrave. I'm kind of done on this Musgrave hype train. They decided they're not going to use him in the middle of the field anymore, and they're just going to have him run 4-yard outs, which is just not going to do anything for fantasy. Don't quite understand that, but this is what I see. So you have to kind of make your analysis based on that.
Yeah, fair enough. I actually saw a few shares of Taysom Hill available in my leagues, which is kind of interesting because I'm sure in our Yahoo threshold he's above 70%. And Peanut also asks, do you guys believe Taysom will stay a constant role in the Saints offense, or should you be trading him high? I don't know. Trading high is a relative question, right? It depends on what you're overall getting. Yeah. But I think rest of season Taysom Hill probably is in that same vein of top 10 tight end. Dallas Goedert's going to be out for likely at least 4 weeks. Could be on injured reserve. You had Kyle Pitts do poorly. Well, he's been fine, but poorly for what he should be doing. Darren Waller's also on injured reserve. So there really is, after Sam Laporta, who's a tight end 5, I think rest of season you could pick anybody for the other side.
I mean, unless you just lost Goddard or you lost Waller and you're not sure about him, and Hill was your solution to that problem, I would absolutely be hearing out offers. I know that he has been very, very good statistically over the last few weeks and filling up the box score. I guess I'm in college basketball mode right now. I look at all the columns in the box score. Taysom Hill finds a way to sneak into each of them, and that's interesting. But historically, right? I know it's kind of a what have you done for me lately league and game that we play here, but historically, Hill's production has been far more volatile than what we've seen over these last few weeks. So I think we're going to see that even out soon enough.
He gets a good matchup this week against the Vikings. So if I could hold on to Taysom Hill for one more week, I would choose to do so. But there's too many of these guys, and it's the reason why I traded Sam Laporta in a few leagues, because I like to trade McBride, and I think rest of the season he'll be fine. But the Cade Ottons, Luke Musgraves of the world, I think you can get by starting them most weeks, and there might be advantages to having additional running backs or receivers or whatever you're able to parlay with some of those top tight ends. So I think Cade Otton firmly belongs to that mix. The David Njokus of the world, where you're not happy about 5 for 60, but certainly doesn't hurt you either. Mm-hmm. That's where I see Cade Otton kind of resting.
Yeah. I have Otton in a 16-teamer, and Njoku is my other tight end. And I'm almost afraid to start Otton and just take the 10 points from Njoku every week. But it's a coin toss every week. They're the exact same tier ranking for me.
Yeah. I had Tank Dell as 4 again, more so because he had the 48%, which likely means he's not available in most places. I threw Albert Okwuegbunam because I love him, and I like to say his name at least, on my list of the top 5, just to round it out as a deep sleeper of sorts. Again, Dallas Goedert injured, I think it was his forearm, if I read that correctly. Eagles
he, like broke his forearm.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if they put him on IR yet. I should probably know that.
Well, the Eagles aren't on bye, so I don't think they have to. I don't think you have to put something on injury reserve yet.
But I've seen IR candidate, but just about everywhere I've read anything about him.
Okay, and if he is, that's putting you like into week 1 of postseason fantasy playoff territory, possibly into week 2, depending on when he's able to play. So you might just have to find another tight end overall. Really, really difficult schedule over the next month for the Eagles. I know they got the 49ers, the Chiefs, I think another Cowboys and Bills matchup to come in all those 4 weeks. But if there was a tight end, it sure is not going to be Jack Stoll or whoever else. Like if you want
Jack
to
Stoll,
use a
wasn't
tight
he
end,
a villain in Ant-Man.
Maybe.
Jack
You're probably
Stoll.
right. Just like Danny DeVito is.
Oh, no. I'm thinking of Corey Stoll. He played that guy with the face in the Ant-Man movie.
Tommy DeVito, whatever.
Danny DeVito.
We're at a point now where names just don't matter from a football perspective. The good fella.
Another Marvel reference. Oh, we're using made-up names now.
Yes.
Like, that's what I think when you say Alberto.
Yeah, so I'm interested at least in that regard. But we're talking. I'm not even having him on stake league or any like deeper leagues out there. I think Alberto quite maybe have to see it first from the Eagles, but they're going to have a tight end available. I don't think it's just A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith that gets more workload. They utilize that position so well that somebody has to emerge, and I don't think it's Jack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I don't see much appeal in that whole situation.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Let's get a quick break with Blue Wire and then come back with these running backs overall and discuss Keaton Mitchell a bit more. Okay, we're back, and we talked about the Week 10 buys. Easily one of the more difficult situations because, well, at least 3 of these teams, if not 4, have fantasy-relevant players. So the Chiefs, Dolphins, Rams, and Eagles. Week 11, I think we'll have at least one more relevant team, but Week 12, no buys. And then rest of season, you're talking about a lot of the crappier versions of the NFL teams that have bye weeks. So this might be the hardest one to try to stash a player, and I think that's kind of what we're referring to with Keaton Mitchell. We talked about the top of the show. I'm not stashing him. This is a rest of the season, spend all my budget type of player. But I know you differ on the opinion.
Well, and speaking of late buys here, Keaton Mitchell's Week 13 buy in the Ravens. So I've been
that's tough too. Yep.
Yeah. So that that's one less week you're getting out of him, and again, just kind of playing devil's advocate at this point, but they got the Browns this week, who are the 3rd best defense against opposing backs in PPR and the 4th best defense in standard formats. So it's a real tough short-term matchup. You know what's going to happen here is people are going to pick him up. He'll end up with like 3 carries for 6 yards this week. They'll drop him, and then he'll have really good games against the Bengals, the Chargers, the Rams.
They'll drop him, and you have to consider do you hold him through his bye week? Yeah,
exactly. So it's going
to
be
a tough spot.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's available again on the waiver wire if you miss out this time around. That's what I'm saying.
Well, that's fair. Along the same vein of Tank Dell, who was at 48% roster on Yahoo, there is Devin Singletary, and I was surprised because I was doing the notes on Saturday. And Dameon Pierce had been ruled out. Like, oh, okay, there's going to be some value in this. Everywhere I looked, I'm in 15 leagues. Everywhere Devin Singletary had been picked up. Of course, taking advantage of Pierce being out does pretty well. Yep. In the same vein, you have Zach Charbonnet, who's been splitting a bit more time with Kenneth Walker. So 2 guys that are likely rostered in most places, but I think you have to at least look for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Singletary, 13 carries for 26 yards, pretty classic Singletary line. 74% of snaps there. He also ran 25 routes. So I think that there's standalone value here, even though, maybe the production's not popping off the page entirely. There's standalone value here because I think he was creeping up into RB1 over Pierce before Pierce went down with injury anyway. I mean, did I write down, did we mention him? Oh, we didn't mention him specifically last week, but of course, then the Pierce news happens after our show. So there's standalone value for Singletary, and I could think of a whole lot less useful players to waste a roster spot on here. So Singletary is absolutely in the mix.
Yeah, and I mentioned Charbonnet as well, too. I guess I haven't been following this closely because Kenneth Walker has been, it feels like the de facto starter, but he hasn't produced to that level, and Charbonnet has been pretty good. Yeah. So is that changing too?
So Charbonnet hasn't actually had the production to match his usage yet. So if you follow the usage, I think it's back-to-back weeks now where Charbonnet has played more than half the snaps for the Seahawks and outsnapped Kenneth Walker here. The problem is Walker got 9 carries, turned him into 16 yards, wonderful. Whereas Charbonnet got 4 carries, turned him into 8 yards. Walker got 2 targets, Charbonnet got 1 target. So there's a change into the guard happening, and you can see it when Pete Carroll talks about Charbonnet in the press conference. The guy gushes over him. He absolutely loves him. So I'm actually a big fan of Charbonnet having a breakout at some point down the stretch here, but not confident enough to just go ahead and pick him up and throw him in my lineup this week. So here's an example I got for you. In a keeper league, 2 keepers, right? Keep the players for what you paid for them at auction, or if you get a pickup, it's 0. Okay. I am a seller big time this season. It didn't work out. Somehow I had a Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown stack, and I'm still a seller.
Oh, man. Okay, that's tough.
So there are a lot of things that did not go right in that situation here. But obviously, Hurts and Brown are my my most valuable assets. Also, I have James Conner and T. Higgins that I can't keep anymore after this year, so I'm trying to unload them. Anyway, I traded A.J. Brown for and A.J. Brown I spent $71 at auction because inflation's wild, so I wasn't keeping him anyway. Right? I traded A.J. Brown to a contender for Zach Charbonnet at $0, possible keeper. Okay. And $20 in next year's auction budget.
Oh, I like that. Getting a little bit of asset value.
So we can move up to 25, and then there's a catch where, like, if you finish in 11th place, you have to give half of it back, and you finish 12th place, you have to give all of it back. But it's just to prevent like the super rampant tanking and keep people competitive. But there are some teams that are in far worse shape than mine in that format, so I'm confident I'll be able to avoid the seller there and keep that auction money. But that's how I turned down Deontay Johnson and $20 for AJ Brown, just because Johnson was maybe fringe keepable, and I thought maybe I'll get someone that I know can help me now to make sure I stay out of the cellar. But I eventually those were the 2 offers I had, and I took the Charbonnet one because I'm that confident in a breakout the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure in that scenario rest of the year is what you're looking for, because we've seen so many injuries to other positions. All it takes is one thing to Kenneth Walker, and Zach Charbonnet becomes Kenneth Walker last year, where Rashad Penny was out, and the rest of the season was like a 1,400-yard rusher.
Say, Kenneth Walker hasn't been an exemplary.
I think it's just been matchup based, right? Like, the Seahawks were blitzkrieged out of that game by the first quarter by the Ravens. Like, there's going to be more relevant games where they are in contention, and while I don't think they are a relevant playoff team, they are a good enough team to be the 5, 6, 7 seed in the NFC, which means there's going to be more opportunities for Charbonnet or Kenneth Walker to get more involved. So I'm right there with you on that. Jake, do we have a bit of breaking news? We have Daniel Capson tells us Carson Wentz.
I think that's a joke.
Oh, no, Carson Wentz, the Rams darn.
That's not actually real.
All right.
I don't know. Maybe we're just a little bit slow here. The most breaking news I have here is that Will Levis is going to start moving forward over Tannehill.
Great breaking news there.
And Traylon Burks is out next week. So.
Shocker for the rest of the world, I guess. Mm-hmm.
Hang on a second.
Well, while Jake's looking.
Wait, okay, yeah, never mind. He's right. Carson Wentz actually just signed with the Rams, so we do have breaking news.
So this is going to be like Baker Mayfield last year, where he gets 4 days rest, comes in, and actually wins a football game, because we just saw Brett Ripien look miserably bad against a defense that you would think could be torched like the Packers, but somehow was able to escape the win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with a even further depleted secondary after the Rasul Douglas trade. Those guys actually looked like they had a clue out there, but I guess Brett Ripien will do that to you. And what does that say about Stafford? Like, you can't feel good if you're a Stafford owner if they're going out and making it and signing Carson Wentz.
That says my bet in March that had the Rams finishing fourth in the division and Cardinals finishing third was like plus 1,600. That might have a chance to pay off, because I would imagine that's an injury reserve stint coming up for Matthew Stafford if you start signing Carson Wentz. Or, maybe unrealistically, they think they have a shot at the playoffs. That loss against the Packers is going to really hurt them, I think, in the standings. And I wouldn't be surprised. You're not signing Carson Wentz for a 1-game thing, a 2-game thing. I don't think he chooses to go to Los Angeles if that's the case. So.
And of course, our note yesterday on Stafford says optimism for Week 11.
Yeah, right. Somehow less optimistic.
Somehow less optimistic now. So okay, interesting. Had a little bit of fun breaking news here.
Yeah, the Rams again are on bye this week, so maybe that's the other part of this too, is that you could get a week to assimilate a quality backup in there. I'm not sure if you can really say quality backup. My first takeaway when Carson Wentz signs with the Rams was, can't wait to stream the opposing defense, but we will get to Week 11 before that really becomes a possibility, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. So a couple more running backs to hit, maybe?
Yeah. Real quick.
I was going to say we got sidetracked by this.
Might be more important than
remember the one guy tuned in and left because we talked about Trey Lance for 2 seconds, right? Well, imagine someone walking in hearing us talk about Carson Wentz and be like, "Yep, I'm out of here. Screw these guys," right? All right, so the other running back I had on my list, Antonio Gibson, again, highly rostered, 45%, but he's sneaking into the Brian Robinson workload, and obviously he's a passing down back, right? He had 5 targets compared to 2 for Robinson. He didn't see that many less snaps than Robinson. Obviously, Robinson, 18 rushes for 63 and a touchdown. Gibson just 6 for 34. So, listen, Gibson can be useful. There's a little bit of standalone value as a desperation flex play. If something ever happens to Brian Robinson, suddenly Gibson is back to being, top 25 RB, maybe on the fringe of something like that. So there's definitely some utility there.
I've been really interested in acquiring guys that have been on injury reserve and could be returning soon. So James Conner, perfect example. He might be eligible to return this week with Kyler Murray. So you might have missed that boat.
Oh,
Devon
is James
Achane,
Conner actually under our threshold? Because that would be that would
no,
be my
well,
number one.
I apologize. This isn't quite the waiver wire portion of the show, but I would imagine you're trading for James Conner. He is not available to be picked up.
Yeah, 89% rostered.
So trading for James Conner, trading for Devon Achane. The Dolphins are on bye this week, and then I think one more week before he's eligible to turn. So it's week 12. Mm-hmm. I kind of think Antonio Gibson's in the same mix for me as well, too, where I would be trying to trade something like Jerry Jeudy for Antonio Gibson if I'm trying to boost my running back 3 or 4. Not even so much that he's taking Brian Robinson's role, but that the Commanders traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young means that defense, which probably wasn't really good, is even worse. And I think Sam Howell has proven to be a really good guy that can at least lead spread killing drives and involve Antonio Gibson in there quite a bit. Like, I think rest of season, a 0.75 version of Rachaad White or like a 0.65 version of Alvin Kamara, you can do a lot worse. Like that's a valuable roster spot. Whereas I think some of these receivers, again, that Jerry Jeudy likes, are not to that level.
The other thing is Curtis Samuel's been dealing with a toe injury. He missed.
Oh, true.
He didn't suit up last week. So a lot of those short passes that might go to Samuel are now kind of going to Gibson.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They'll use him over Dynami Brown or whatever that looks like on the depth chart.
Yeah, and then you had also listed Jamal Williams, who is at 30% rostered, played the most amount of snaps that he has since September. I was working on this with one of our interns earlier today. I would credit the Jamal Williams usage in large part to the Saints recognizing they don't really need to have Alvin Kamara worked to a full extent against the Bears of all teams. Like this is the one of those matchups where you want to have Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller or wherever else taking more of a workload because you want to save Alvin Kamara for games that matter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll admit I was grasping at straws for running backs.
No, it's okay.
Everybody wants to know about the running backs, but sometimes they ain't out there. And that's the case for a lot of them. Except I was helping someone the other day. It must be a small league that wanted to know if they should pick up Madison or Chuba Hubbard off the wire.
Yeah, it's a smaller league, man.
Yeah, it's a smaller league, but I was like, you can bid on Madison, but Hubbard's the same player, so don't go too crazy.
I've seen Miles Sanders dropped in a few places, and I'm like, I think we're done with that. I've dropped Dalvin Cook.
I mean, I'd rather have Gibson, Charbonnet, Singletary, or Mitchell than Miles Sanders at this point.
Yeah. Maybe not Singletary, but I'm not going to care if somebody else wants him.
I don't know. But anyway, so Jamal Williams, he's only 29% rostered. He played his most snaps in September, but only 3 carries and 3 targets. So do with that what you will. But that is another possible option to look at. He's someone that you grab, maybe hope vultures a goal line carry, that somehow Taysom Hill doesn't vulture it that week. And then you hope for the best there.
Yeah, before we get to the receivers, let's get a word from our sponsors here real quick. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sundays in Las Vegas this year, which means the big game poolside is at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic visual effects all throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more, or touchdown at the world's largest sportsbook, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. And don't miss these legendary viewing experiences February 11th. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. And also, RotoWire is a proud sponsor and partner with Splash Sports for the 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up a contest add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles such as DFS, Pick X, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sports books, Splash Sports pits you against friends and family, not the house. So Splash goes beyond betting. It's a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tier contests on Splash Sports all season long. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Well, visit rotowire.com/splash to enter today. That's not fair. /splash is a very tricky line to go ahead and read. From a receiver perspective, we had mentioned Rashid Shaheed last week. Pop Douglas, who once again made our top 5 list. We had Mingo as well, too, the second-round receiver for the Panthers. Khalil Shakir got a little bit more involved, too, with Gabe Davis injured. And Noah Brown.
I don't think Gabe Davis was injured. I just think he didn't catch a ball.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Was he actually injured? I think he was just terrible.
He might have just been terrible. That happens a lot as well, too. I had other things.
This is how it works for me, right? You know, I put Gabe Davis on my bench, and he goes and scores a couple touchdowns. Oh, better put him in the lineup this week.
Yeah, he is. He's like the Deshaun Jackson of the 2010s, where if you're playing best ball, you love Deshaun Jackson, but I felt like I could never get it right on the few times I rostered him. And I feel that way sometimes about Noah Brown in my deeper leagues as well, too. But with Robert Woods out, Noah Brown became another valuable member in C.J. Stroud's obviously record-setting performance on Sunday. So we talked about Tank Dell. For the most part, he's our number one target, but he's just widely picked up in a lot of places.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, he's the first name you type in. Might as well take a look. Tank Dell at 48%. He's wide receiver 1 for the Texans, right? And little did we know at the start of the year that C.J. Stroud would be able to support 3 fantasy wide receivers in this offense here. Wide receiver 2 is Nico Collins. I'm still pretty much starting him every week in my 12-team 3-receiver league. Wide receiver 3 right now is Noah Brown, and he played 74% of the snaps, ran 32 routes, just a few less than Nico and Tank. Ended up with 6 targets, which was third on the team after Dalton Schultz and Dell, who each had 11 targets. So Noah Brown is interesting. He's palatable, but he's the guy that probably loses out when Robert Woods comes back.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well too. Noah Brown obviously was okay for the Cowboys at times. Not somebody, especially if you listen to a few other RotoWire folks, who has a lot of talent overall. So maybe that's an aberration that we've seen just off the workload and what Stroud's been able to do. So we'd also mentioned Pop Douglas, who made our top 5, but we had talked about him last week too. Still involved from a receiving perspective for the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, he's wide receiver 1. And again, yes, it's Mac Jones. Yes, it's the Patriots. But wide receiver 1 has a degree of value somewhere here.
Yep. I'm just responding to our Wentz question. McVay has already said that Matthew Stafford will start after the team's bye, so Wentz is just a backup. Okay, that's fine. Whatever, that's okay.
Should I delete my Wentz claim? I mean, don't. I did. What scenario are you making a Wentz claim?
He was asking if DeVito was worth rostering. So that's
okay.
That's how dire of a situation you might be dealing with.
Oh man, 20-team Superflex. Jeez.
I was going to say in the Scott Fishbowl, are you rostering DeVito?
In the Scott Fishbowl, I started Tyson Bagent and Jaron Hall last week. So
right, and that was probably over DeVito. Like you were the only person in that league that had to be. Yeah. Anyway, that's a tough league to be in.
This ties into our 2 quarterback discussion that'll come up in a little bit, but I guess we can do some quick hitter, long shot wide receivers first.
Well, yeah, and I was going to mention if you were desperate at quarterback, you could be very desperate in considering Darius Slayton. In all of my leagues, like when I was looking at receiver, that was the only guy that was available to pick up, got 11 fantasy points. Of course, that passing situation in New York is quite easily the worst in the league, and I don't think it's particularly close. I don't think that changes if Barkley becomes the quarterback for them. Not Saquon Barkley, Matt Barkley. I'm blanking on it right now. Anyway,
Matt Barkley, yes. Barkley to Barkley.
Yeah, I mean, that might be the only offense the Giants have. So, like, somebody theoretically has to catch passes for the Giants. I think Wan'Dale Robinson also been a little bit struggling as well too.
Yeah, he's definitely fallen down.
I'm not considering Slayton, but if you are in the deepest of leagues and really need a receiver, again, a lot of good teams on bye this week, maybe that's the guy that you look at.
I mean, but for all intents and purposes, Darius Slayton is wide receiver 1, both this past week and for the entire season here. I mean, he led all receivers with 82% of the snaps, led in route rate, led in with 7 targets. Of course, 4 for 59. That's not a huge, nothing to write home about, but that's still the best out of this crappy bunch here. And then on the season, his target share is 16%, which isn't a high number in terms of that statistic, but it is the highest on the Giants by a little more than 3%, just beating on Wan'Dale Robinson. And his air yard share, again, I love these stats from the box score breakdown. Jerry's brilliant. Check it out on the site. His air yard share is 29.3%, which is not too bad. And a few Jalen Hyatt is high in that number, as you can imagine, the big play guy.
Yeah.
But Darius Slayton still has a higher number than him. So, again, across the board, Darius Slayton is wide receiver 1 if you can stomach having to watch the Giants at all. And
yeah. I'll say this, Jake. Like, I would take Darius Slayton over any of these long shot receivers that you have. So, like, give me the quick hitters on these, just so people understand the lack of depth at the wide receiver position right now.
Yeah. This is a tough one here. So Jalen Waddle missed a little bit of time. He was kind of in and out of the game with a knee injury, and of course they're on a bye. So Cedric Wilson played a season best 76% of snaps, and even scored a 31-yard touchdown. It was his only catch on 5 targets. So we might have a wide receiver 3 there. Obviously, you can't use him this week. Donovan Peoples-Jones,
traded away to the Lions. Yep.
Traded away to the Lions. So Cedric Tillman, who is available everywhere, he got 73% of the snaps and 66% of the routes. Basically, he took over for Peoples-Jones, but that led to just 1 target there. So what are you going to do with that? I'm not, despite Odell Beckham scoring a touchdown in complete garbage time and putting forth a 5 catches on 7 targets for 56 and a score line, I'm not interested in Odell Beckham here. He is wide receiver 3 on a team that probably, I don't have the stat in front of me, but if you had to guess who has the highest run pass play percentage in the National Football League, it's got to be the Ravens still, right? Or right up there. Yeah. So again, not interested in the wide receiver 3 there. And then, Drake London was inactive with a groin injury. That was kind of a surprise. Kadarius Hodge led the wide receivers in snap share and tied Van Jefferson for the routes lead. Finished with caught 3 of his 6 targets for 60 yards, 127.2 air yards. That's interesting because I always thought in my head that Mac Hollins was going to be wide receiver 2 there, if it was even going to matter. But again, we've got this whole Falcons scheme that is purposefully unpredictable to troll fantasy owners, and it was Kadarius Hodge this week. Again, long shots, but maybe there's a time or a place for these guys.
Yeah, I'd take Darius Slayton over every one of those. Maybe not Odell. I don't know. Maybe.
I'd take Slayton over Odell.
Yeah. Before we get off the receivers real quick, Mateo has a question that I think is actually pretty good here. So he got offered Austin Eckler for Javonte Williams and then one of his receivers. One of those receivers to pick from is Brandon Ayuk, Terry McLaurin, Devonta Smith, Jordan Addison, or Calvin Ridley. Which of those receivers should he package with Javonte Williams to get Eckler?
As odd as it sounds, I think I'm going to package Addison. Most people would say Ridley. But I think I'm going Addison in this situation because, even though we ranked Josh Dobbs at the start of the year, he's still Josh Dobbs. We saw plenty of bad. Addison is just not going to be as productive under Dobbs as he was Cousins. That's the reality of the situation. Number 2, Justin Jefferson. The Vikings haven't made a complete decision on whether he's coming back or going to be activated here and ready to roll for Week 10, but that window's going to open pretty soon here. So Addison is about to see more competition with a worse quarterback throwing in the football.
And a bye week. And a bye week to come, whereas a guy like Calvin Ridley just had his bye week. So I would go Addison as well, then Ridley. I think I would include McLaurin. Like if this guy was really pushing against it, McLaurin's the other one that I'd throw in.
I would include Sarah to get Eckler.
I'm not getting rid of Ayuk. I'm not getting rid of Devonta Smith in that scenario. So go Addison, Ridley, then McLaurin. That's the trio of receivers that I would trade in that instance as well.
As long as we're doing trades, I had 2 trades declined that I thought were pretty close in that same keeper league. I dealt A.J. Brown in, trying to get rid of Jalen Hurts, right? I offered Jalen Hurts in exchange for an $8 Ayuk and $5 auction dollars. That was turned down. I offered Hurts for a $10 Addison and $5 auction dollars. He wanted me to send auction dollars back, and I was like, I don't know about that. But both of those were turned down, but I thought they were close.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I heard that you didn't accept any stake league trades, despite us talking about that all of last week as well. That was a Travis Kelce deal.
Yeah, I didn't. I can look back and see what those offers were. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I wasn't close enough. I thought I was getting close with Curtis, but we couldn't quite reach an agreement there. And Travis Kelce will still be mine.
Oh, well, okay. Wow.
Oh, yeah, the Iceman, whatever.
It's Curtis. Well, it's Kurt. We're not full naming him. We're not legal birth naming Curtis here.
I'm pretty sure that's what Herb always calls him. So
Iceman is definitely the better route.
All right. Anyway, we don't need our inside office jokes. We can move on here.
All right.
We got some quarterbacks to talk about.
And I promise as few or as less Carson Wentz conversation as we possibly can. So surprisingly, like you put on the podcast rundown here, Kyler Murray, only rostered in 60% of leagues. He is going to be active this week. If the Cardinals choose not to activate him, they are literally just trying to save money. There's an insurance policy on his knee, and I think it goes like the other way around, that if he were to get injured, the Cardinals have to then guarantee the next 2 years of his contract. So if there were some shenanigans with not activating him off the PUP list, it's because A, Kyler really wants to play Call of Duty this weekend. That's the new Call of Duty release date. And B,
right.
the Cardinals are trying to be safe.
They're forcing that out on people now, aren't they, on the Xbox?
Yes, they are. Well, before we get to the quarterbacks, real quick, we got a question from Caden here. I love it. He's got 6-3 record right now, 12-man PPR. He is looking to trade, I would assume, some of these guys, or like who. Let's break it down this way. Who would you feel comfortable of this roster group trading? And I think the obvious names would be Gabe Davis, Christian Watson, Rashee Rice. And would you also think about trading Chuba Hubbard right now?
Yeah, so I'd first look to see if you can package guys like Davis, Watson, even Taysom. Try to do a 2-for-1 to upgrade at any of the positions here. I mean, the running backs are probably a little bit weak because we can't quite put Charbonnet in the lineup yet. Chuba's a viable flex here. Rashad White, as a Rashad White owner in a few leagues, he's just been very inconsistent. And Saquon Barkley is going to suffer, I think, along with this Giants offense. So running back is where you're going to be looking to improve probably. You could even Barkley's the best asset, but see if you could package like Davis or Watson with Barkley to get like a top running back.
Yeah.
Otherwise, as we told the person earlier in the show here, float Taysom Hill out there. See if you can get some sell high offers on there, and or wait until next week, like you said, to see if he has a good matchup with Detroit. So, like I'd usually be doing. Obviously, quarterback set. You don't need to worry about that at all.
So I'm going the other way on this. I think I would dangle Saquon Barkley. And I'm wondering, rest of the season, that quarterback situation is going to be, as somebody said, between quarterback 27 and 32 every single week. Okay, great. Saquon's superhuman. He's fantastic. Maybe the name recognition is not going to scare people off of what's possible from a trade. And I would be trying to improve at my wide receiver 2 with Hollywood Brown or Gabe Davis, or you go another direction. Let's just say I'm going to get a Sam Laporta or another tight end flex that might have been cheaper because somebody had multiple tight ends. We've talked about that a lot. I made a lot of those moves where I traded Sam Laporta and somebody for Rashad White, trying to upgrade at running back 2. You can do the flip side of this as well, but to a higher extent with Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel good about the tight end situation here. Even with Dobbs at quarterback, I feel like they're going to scheme Hawkinson enough. I actually also am starting to kind of fall in love with Rashee Rice rest of season. I'm finally getting on your train here. I think that while these things take some time, I think Mahomes and Rice are going to are going to continue to develop more and more chemistry, and there has to be a wide receiver 1 in that offense. Why not Rashee Rice? So I'd be hesitant to package him unless the comeback was good there. And I know you're selling a little bit low on Christian Watson too in this situation, but I think you can sell him while there is even a hint of value.
I mean, he might have been droppable. Like if we were really being honest with this receiver group for the Packers and like rest of season, I don't think that guy's a top 50 receiver. So
all right, well, thanks, Caden, for the tip. I hope that helps you out here, and keep us updated next week. What I
was gonna say, like if you trade offers in mind, or you get any, feel free to shoot a tweet to either myself at JB Fantasy Sports or at Jake at Roto Jake. But continuing on through the quarterbacks, we mentioned Kyler Murray. I'm picking him up, by the way, with all the quarterback injuries. Rest of season, that guy's like quarterback 10 minimum to me.
I picked up Kyler Murray 2 weeks ago for nothing on the waiver wire. I mean, we don't really keep quarterbacks in this league, but $0, right? Picked him up for nothing on the waiver wire in preparation for eventually trading Hurts for next year's capital.
Yeah.
So I feel good about him. I feel good about him rest of season. I mean, there are some because he's going to come back at the same time Connor's going to come back,
right?
And then Murray's going to make Hollywood Brown better. I think he's going to make Rondale Moore better, even though his usage is weird. We'll see what we actually have in Michael Wilson over there. Michael Wilson's another wide receiver you could probably go out and get, again, just hoping that he plays a little bit better, gets some more accurate targets with Murray there. But so Murray's the first guy you look at because he's still only 59%.
Well, I think he could raise the floor of Trey McBride as well. Like I don't think that offense changes much. I don't think they don't utilize. I think they utilize their tight ends just as much as they were with Josh Dobbs with Kyler Murray. So yeah, I agree. I think the floor of that offense gets raised significantly, provided they do choose, in fact, to activate him and have him play on the release of Call of Duty weekend. We'll see if that was a smart choice to hold him off that long. So we had Jimmy G officially demoted. Antonio Pierce. This throwback to how old I am. I remember playing with him in Madden 2006 as my middle linebacker. Now head coach of your.
That's the same Antonio Pierce.
Wow. Oh yeah.
That never clicked for me.
It definitely is. Yeah. Now the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders and could be rest of the year given how the team seems to be responding. Aiden O'Connell likely going to be your starting quarterback rest of the season for the Raiders, given where they seem to be. The Jets are traveling to Las Vegas and favored by 2 this week. We just watched them put up 6 points and like 4 first downs on national TV less than 24 hours ago, and yet the Jets are somehow favored by 2. So that kind of underscores, I think, the spot that we're in with Las Vegas at the moment.
That and the fact that O'Connell, I completely missed this news while heading to Lambeau, or maybe it happened on Saturday, but
it did, yeah.
I came back. Otherwise, I'd have made a play for him in Fishbowl, given my situation.
I can't believe he's available. Okay, well, that's fine. All right.
He was. I actually had him and cut him after Jimmy G came back, because what am I holding on to O'Connell for, right?
Right.
But anyway, so here's the thing, though. He played the Giants, and he just had 10.5 fantasy points. So, but on the bright side, he didn't have any sacks or turnovers. So I guess that's kind of where you have to glass half full with the quarterback play on the bottom half of the league this year, right? So there's that.
Yeah, Josh Dobbs also on our list. He made my top 5 list at pretty high, again, with all the other quarterbacks, including Mahomes and Jalen Hurts that are out for buys this week. We have Stafford. It appears to be back for week 11, but if not, Carson Wentz maybe seeing a sighting for him. Then obviously Tommy DeVito, not Danny DeVito, is going to be starting moving forward. Matt Barkley waiting in the wings. Yeah. And that's just, it's an abomination of a quarterback spot.
It's bad. So should we call Tommy DeVito the good fella because of his character, or should we call him the Nightcrawler because of Danny DeVito's character in Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
I would like to just call him Danny DeVito, period. You can call him whatever you want.
Tommy DeVito.
We
just want to say Danny DeVito, don't you?
Yeah, I'm going to just call him Danny DeVito rest of the season, just like Tyson Bagel until it becomes Tyson Bagent when he has a couple of good games. So we'll see. If Danny DeVito does well, then he can get his first name back. That's the deal with me.
Fair enough.
Fair trade.
That's an honor to get. I mean, Danny DeVito is a legendary actor of our time. So I mean, that is.
Would that make the Giants season more compelling if current Danny DeVito was quarterback of them as opposed to Tommy DeVito? I would watch more Giants football if Danny DeVito was the quarterback.
Danny DeVito should show up in the box score to the games. It would be bigger than Taylor Swift. I mean, that guy's a god.
The Swifties are coming after you. It's at RotoJake on Twitter. Don't do anything with JB Fantasy Sports. At RotoJake Swifties. Go ahead and
is engagement.
Yeah, go after him there. Okay. Enough Danny DeVito talk. From a tight end perspective, we had mentioned Trey McBride last week, Taysom Hill last week. We talked about Cade Otton now on our top 5 list. I think he's certainly a relevant option. Juwan Johnson finally making a reappearance on our waiver wire pickup list, getting his first touchdown of the year. I think the over-under I saw was like 6.5 to begin the season. I should have just hit immediate under on that, and I panicked because I thought the Saints would be good this year.
He missed a lot of time, played a season-best 74 snaps, so I wanted to note that, and, of course, first touchdown. But he's really the kind of guy I think of, I don't know, maybe like a slightly upgraded Mo Alley Cox, or just like a touchdown-only guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like Donald Parham-ish. Kind of in that vein.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's not super attractive. Jonnu Smith continues to get a lot of work. If you've had to start him, I think it's been okay. And Kyle Pitts still getting more involved too. I wonder if Drake London comes back, that changes.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Drake London will come back. That's the issue, at least for this week. So. I mean, Jonnu
Smith had 5 catches, 100 yards, and a score. That's interesting. Pitts still ran
off
more
a 60-yard touchdown, and it was like a broken play, though. Did you see the replay of that?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah, they showed it at Lambeau. You might have been doing other things at Lambeau. Yeah, yes, they did show it at Lambeau. You might have been doing other things.
Might have been a beer run. I don't know.
Yeah, that's all right. There was plenty of time for beer runs throughout most of that Packers game. I think the way Arthur Smith is choosing to run the offense means that Jonnu Smith is a fantasy relevant tight end rest of the season. You're not happy about it. And I think especially if the bye weeks are done in week 14, then you could safely say, all right, this headache is complete. But it's not Kyle Pitts that's getting forced for the ball like he should. It's been both those guys. So I think Jonnu Smith is an interesting name. I would take him more than my boy, Albert Okwegbenum, who, again, I like more as the guy that fills in for Dallas Goedert, who probably goes on injured reserve next week. Jack Stoll could be more of the blocking specialist. I mean, Albert O was a disappointment with the Broncos. Hasn't really pushed for more playing time with the Eagles. It was a transaction that occurred at the cut-down deadline and probably was one that the Eagles general manager was looking for in the future. Or if the situation were to occur, he was going to have to play more. I don't know. We'll see. It's not an attractive list of tight ends either, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's rough across the board here. I threw in, again, we got to have more DeVito talk, but I threw in Daniel Bellinger, who got an 85% snap share and 68% route share with Darren Waller inactive. He's someone that, maybe I'd throw out in the fishbowl with double tight end points. But, there's very, very unique circumstances for that.
We got a follow-up from Caden on his trade question. He says, I don't expect you guys to get this question. Don't worry, we got you, Caden. Would you target DeAndre Swift for a killer playoff schedule? So you face the Giants, Cardinals, and Giants once more, or Jonathan Taylor, Falcons, Raiders, Texans. And I would assume if you're trading for probably Jonathan Taylor, you have to give up Barkley in that scenario. This is an overall question, Jake, that I'll pose to you. Are you looking at playoff schedules if and when you are acquiring people in trade right now? Like, are you that forward thinking at this point in the fantasy season?
Sure, but if it's more of a tiebreaker than anything else. Like,
so it's not like a focal point or a priority for you.
Yeah, it's more of I mean, to me, it's just the quality of the player first if you're making a blockbuster deal of this sort. So really this question is, who are you ranking higher rest of season, Jonathan Taylor or DeAndre Swift? I obviously wouldn't have got this answer after the first 4 or 5 weeks here, but I think I'm leaning Taylor. He took over. It's been a timeshare since he came back here.
Yep.
But Zach Moss last week only it was his lowest. Let me see. His lowest snap share of the season, 19%. Jonathan Taylor 75%. Taylor ran 20 routes and Moss ran 3. And Taylor caught the receiving touchdown here. So I don't know if we can officially claim changing the guard here, but we're getting back to Jonathan Taylor, the Jonathan Taylor that we think that we're getting, when he's there and he's healthy. And as much as I like DeAndre Swift and how he's proven anything that I've thought about him in the past wrong by being productive with Philadelphia, it's still a weird committee for DeAndre Smith, right? Kenneth Gainwell's going to vulture a touchdown.
Yep.
Jalen Hurts is going to push here. You don't get those kind of threats with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. So I'm leaning. I go JT over Swift rest of season.
I agree with you, actually. I was leaning towards that direction as well, and I think you articulated it beautifully. The Falcons, Raiders, Texans. You probably have a few games like the Colts and Titans and maybe Jacksonville against the AFC South, whereas there will be instances for the Eagles where over the next 3 weeks you might fall out of contention. This team was 6-3, who was talking about it, but they have the Chiefs, you have the 49ers, you have the Cowboys again in that mix. I think you have the Bills as well too. So I'm not thinking about fantasy playoffs just yet, and I think to try to get rid of your depth, not so much in this question, but in other ones, looking forward a month and a half from now, I think it's the wrong approach. I'm not looking at playoff schedule just yet when I'm making trades.
One thing I do look at is buys. If one player has a buy still to go and one player's had their
Eagles
buy.
have one going on right now. Colts are already done with theirs.
Don't the Colts have it week 11?
Oh, maybe they do.
Yeah, I Colts have it week 11. So
okay.
this is that's a wash in this situation.
Okay.
But I'm leaning JT, and I feel like a confidence rating probably like 60 to 65%.
I might even go higher than that. I actually feel that good about the Colts offense was what I hoped the Packers offense would be this year. Probably not beating good teams, probably not even beating average teams, but consistently producing points, moving the chains, doing it in a variety of different ways, not just running the ball, not just up the middle with A.J. Dillon, not just doing random reverses, like just consistently good play calling. And I feel very confident rest of season the Colts offense is going to be top half of the league. So I like that question a lot. I appreciate that Caden was passing that along. It looks like he has another follow-up thing, but real quick before we do that, Jake, from a streaming defense perspective, we had a lot of success last week. I would imagine we can get Danny DeVito and a good streaming candidacy this week, but for most people, the Cowboys are already rostered. They're favored by 16 entering Sunday's contest against the Giants. So who are some other options besides the Cowboys?
Okay, so this is a higher rostered option, but the Raiders are 49%. You have sack upside because of a man named Max Crosby, and they get Zach Wilson at home. So interesting. All of the options I'm going to talk about this week are home teams, which doesn't always work out that way. But so I'm looking at the Raiders. I'm also looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against Will Levis. And I know Levis has had one really good week and then one really not so great week, but I know the Bucs defense looked pretty solid last week. We'll take them. This one makes me a little bit sick, but I've seen him recommended across the board. But man, the Bears defense, they're at home. They're 2% rostered. Thursday night game, and they get the Panthers, who are just hapless. So.
Should be the return of Justin Fields as well. Not that it helps the defense per se, but the offense
I got to do something about quarterback and fishbowl then.
Yeah, I don't think you get Tyson Bagel for one more week, unfortunately.
Sadly, yeah. And then I know they looked like trash last week, right? But the Seahawks are 41%, and they get Washington at home. A tanking Washington team. Powell looked okay last week.
Tanking who won? They beat the Patriots last week.
Oh yeah, okay, of course.
Of course. Well, no.
I thought they played the Ravens. Did I mix that up? That was the Seahawks, right?
Yes. Yeah, they played the Patriots. They beat the Patriots. You and everyone else thought they were tanking post Chase Young Montez Sweat trade. They probably are, but that's just how bad the Patriots are that they still lost to the likely tanking Commanders.
Yes, fair enough. But the point I'm trying to make here is even though Powell has had some good weeks, he's also had some very turnover-prone weeks. So they're on the list as well. But so Raiders, Bucks, Bears, Seahawks are the ones that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I like the Bucks one a decent amount. The over-under was at like 42, so maybe it's a bit higher relative to these other ones. The Raiders, they don't have a lot of pieces. Max Crosby, you love a lot. Obviously, he could dominate things against Zach Wilson. Dwayne Brown, that veteran tackle, may make his return this upcoming week. It's also it's not the Sunday night game. I'm sorry, it's not the Monday night game. I think it's the Sunday night game. So you get some primetime action, which I like. I like having that. I need X amount of points from X amount of players. But there's certainly some streaming candidacies because of how bad most of the teams are at football right now, especially with 3 quality teams on bye. So that does it for us on the Week 10, the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast brought to you by Circa Sports. Back again next week, obviously talking more waiver wire pickups. But of course, best of luck, everyone, to your fantasy lineups.